Union's articulation of its 2063 vision for the continent has created a compelling call to action for public and private sector players across regions to partner for the growth and development of Africa and her people. These are the views of Ms. Busisiwe Legodi, Chief Executive Officer of CIMERWA. CIMERWA, is what it's called?
CIMERWA, yes.
CIMERWA Limited. And she argues that modernization has a key role to play in the continent's opportunity space. And she joins us, as you heard, to elaborate on her views, and we'll welcome your contribution as well. It's a great pleasure, Ms. Legodi. Thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, and morning to all the listeners.
And ultimately, what this is about Africa gearing towards self-reliance and sustainability. Are we on track for that to happen? I mean, what does Vision 2063 actually say? What is that all about?
Okay, Vision 2063 was agreed in May 2013, where we had to start looking at a paradigm shift, which means now we need to have a continent that is integrated, prosperous and peaceful. I don't think we are already there. But as PPC, as a group, we responded to that vision, because that's when we started to move over. In 2013, on the same year, we started partnering with the Rwanda government to go and have 51% of shareholding in their company called CIMERWA. So we are responding to that vision. And what we did, we didn't just go and partner. We actually modernized the plant. We moved the plant from 100,000 tons per annum to 600,000 tons per annum using the latest technology, which is going to make sure that we are environmentally friendly. We don't import as much cement as we wanted to before. We also create a value chain within Rwanda itself, because it's a chain that goes down. The more cement you produce, the more input materials you're going to need, the more transporters you're going to need, the more everything grows. But now, which means the continent is benefiting. It's not only the company that is benefiting.
All right. I want to go back to one of the earlier things you mentioned, one of the priorities of Agenda 2063, that there needs to be a paradigm shift, that we need to change the way we do things on the continent, and that Africa must start doing things differently in order to take advantage of the current momentum towards 2063.
Yes.
Where exactly do we need to make changes and shifts?
In areas that we really need to make the most shift, you won't believe it, I think it's more on the social side.
Meaning?
When I'm in South Africa, people tell me, I'm going to Africa.
Yes.
Meaning he's going to Nigeria.
Yeah. As if South Africa is not in Africa.
As if South Africa is not part of the continent. So it's a paradigm shift that we need to be looking at. And also in our...
But what do you attribute that to? Is it because, and I could be wrong here, but I've heard people saying that South Africa assumes the position of a big brother to the continent in the same way that the United States does to the rest of the world?
That's not how we are perceived out there. Unfortunately, that's not how we are perceived, because we still call each other by names, but we are all Africans. We still have visa issues in the continent. So once we haven't worked out all those things, they are not a short-term action plans, but there are things that can be started by partnerships, like with businesses, where now they start exploring those fields to understand and partner with them in those fields and grow, because that's the simplest way of getting yourself into Africa. It's through partnering, going there, making sure that the development doesn't happen only in South Africa, but in the entire continent. Share the knowledge. There's a lot of best practices around, but most of the time they're sitting with a small population and it's not given to everybody else.
All right. Now, earlier on, and I want to reiterate the vision for the African Union, which you also read out earlier, an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. I beg your pardon. My question is that integration possible, given the fact that we are at varying levels of development on the continent?
It will take some time. Let's acknowledge that we are still very far. We are starting from a very low base point. For us, going to Rwanda, we have learned a lot, and there's a lot of learnings that people need to understand when they go to Africa, that when they go to the continent, that if you go to a continent, things are different. You need to adapt yourself and adapt your systems according to the way the continent is operating. South Africa, we are really far, to be honest, when it comes to modernization. So when you arrive in the continent, when you arrive there, they don't even have a simple thing as a water bottle.
Well, you speak like the rest of the South Africans saying going to Africa, to other countries in Africa, going to the continent.
This is something that we need to work on, because it's something that is embedded in us, which we need to work hard to make sure that we continentalize ourselves. When I arrive in Nigeria, they should not be able to realize that I'm from South Africa. I'm an African. That's how we need to see ourselves.
All right. In conversation with Ms. Busisiwe Legodi, Chief Executive Officer of CIMERWA Limited, and they are in Rwanda. They also have offices here in South Africa. And we are talking about modernization of the continent and what needs to be done for us to achieve and to reach the Agenda 2063. Busisiwe Legodi argues that modernization is very important and it has a key role to play in the continent's opportunity space and towards Vision 2063 or Agenda 2063. Now, I asked you whether the integration you speak about on the continent is possible, given the fact that the various countries are at different levels of development. And you said it would take a while, but what needs to be done for that process to be fast-tracked?
Okay, thanks, Rowena. For that process to be fast-tracked, I think the continent itself, when we present our businesses and the growth now, because as you know that now Africa is the hub of growth, especially on infrastructure. We need to take opportunities on those, because if we don't, somebody else is going to come in and do that. And if you think about it, if you have to build a cement plant, it means you're giving employment to 300 people and indirect employment to 2,000 people, coming with different skills from different areas. So partnership between the government and the private sector is the main contributor that can speed up that process. And different governments from different countries. Is there
a willingness from governments in other parts of Africa to get involved and to partner with the private sector to this end?
There is. I recently attended a conference in Dubai. That's where I realized that the governments really want the private sector to come and partner with them for the sake of growth, to make sure that the countries are growing. Also, like now in Rwanda, the biggest lesson I've learned is that if you don't partner with government, you can't get yourself moving. Because government is the driver. They're the ones who can make the laws or the rebates better for you so that you can be sustainable. Because it doesn't also help to go and invest in a country and you don't get a benefit of that. Because it has to go down, streamline. We need to be in a position where we are not in a situation as South Africa saying we don't have jobs in South Africa, but we can take our own skills to the entire continent and make a difference, because South Africa is highly developed and we've got a lot of skills around here.
I agree with you when you say that partnerships are very important, especially between the private space and the public sector. The only problem is that sometimes these two forces seem to pull not in the same direction. And that's why I found it very reassuring when I heard President Jacob Zuma speak about the countless meetings that government has held with the private sector. Talk about that, where in some countries that these two forces do pull in separate directions.
Okay, I'll give you an example of the country where I am, because that's where I am now in Rwanda. And the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, he has made it clear that the focus for the country for the next 10 years is industrialization. You cannot industrialize as a government, because government is an institute. To industrialize,
you need the private sector.
You need the private sector to come into the country and invest. And we have seen now that Rwanda is growing at 7 to 8% growth annually, which is a small country with not a lot of, like South Africa, we've got a lot that we can use amongst ourselves. They've got nothing. Mainly they've got a lot of water, which means they can make a lot of power. They've got some minerals, which are not a lot, but the country's growing. So they've used the IT field as where they can grow, which they didn't know. So which means private sector had to come in with those to invest in the country. And now they are leading because they're already on 4G in the country. So that is one example that shows that the government has to pull in the private sector in order to grow the economy. The government cannot do it by its own. And unfortunately, people look at the government to do something. But it's not the responsibility of the government alone. It's a partnership of making sure that the private sector buys into the policy of the country and invest in the country to get the country to grow.
Now, there are other issues on the continent. I mean, there are so many and so varied, and I'd like us to get into some of them. I mean, the ongoing political unrest does us no favors in our developmental path. I mean, leaders wanting to hold on to power long after their official and legal terms in office have expired, rather. And even where you are based in Rwanda, that country held a constitutional referendum to change the constitution so that Paul Kagame can run for a third term in office. So things like that don't augur well for the growth and development of the continent. Africa needs to change that. Talk about that.
I think we need to look at it in a context of why is it like that in Rwanda. If I take you back to what happened in Rwanda in 1994, the genocide. The country had to start from scratch. And Kagame is the guy who really moved the country from that level. And they have been growing since then.
So is he the only one who's capable of maintaining that momentum?
It doesn't mean he's the only one who's capable. People need to get that right. But with the confidence of the community, remember now, it's about the people, what they want. People in Rwanda, they feel Kagame still need to stay a little bit longer for them to achieve some of the goals that they're still working on. One of them, an example, is removing the visa travel system in the Eastern African region. It has happened because of Kagame. So Rwanda is growing very fast.
But if there's coherence and coordination, you don't just need one man at the helm to make sure that these things happen. I think it just perpetuates this culture that Africa needs to rid itself of leaders wanting to stay in power or holding on to power way long after they're supposed to have taken a bow.
Okay, let me take you back again on the partnership between the government and the
hold that thought. I want you to hold that thought. Anthony joining us. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's a little distorted, but please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you. Your guest has raised a couple of very important issues. In my opinion, the Rwanda situation can only be replicated in South Africa if there is one clear, cohesive message in terms of the relationship between business and government. Yes, I accept the president had a couple of meetings with lead captains of industry just before the SONA. But I will assume it's very confusing for him to do that, and then a few weeks down the line you hear messages like white monopoly capital and things like that. And you just don't know exactly what government's position is. Do they want to partner with business? Because business has no color. I'm not sure Paul Kagame distinguishes between foreign investors based on where they are coming from. His baseline is growth for his country, and I think that's why he succeeded. So I believe it's something we have to attempt to replicate in South Africa if there will be meaningful growth.
Thank you very much for your views, Anthony. Very interesting, and I would like your comments on some of these views coming through. Let's take more calls. Eric, good morning. Welcome.
Hi, good day. The lady there is talking politics. She's going around. She doesn't want to name the thing. She's working in Rwanda. She doesn't want to say the thing straight. Can she tell me, because she's saying that the people in Rwanda want Kagame to stay for a third term. Let's assume a few years down the line when ANC was in Limpopo, if they say that the South African wants Thabo Mbeki to stay for the third term, will she support something like that? She mustn't use double standards. She's a South African. She's happy to have a democracy in her country. But when she goes to Rwanda, because she's making money out of that country, because of the support of Kagame, she then say, no, the Rwanda population wants to have him at the helm. That is not possible. A big country like that cannot rely on one person and one person only. Another thing, the second thing, Rwanda doesn't produce any mineral at all. They are looting the DRC and they are building Kigali, and you cannot then integrate Africa. I'm from DRC. I'm talking about something that I know very well. So she cannot tell me that integration in Africa will continue like this when a country is looting another one to make their development. So now this kind of integration with Rwanda and Uganda intervening now in Burundi to destabilize that country, we know, we can talk about what Nkurunziza have done is not good. But they, as neighbors, are destabilizing another country. Is this the Kwame Nkrumah dream of 2063? I'm asking her to commit herself to say if she wants a third term for Zuma or for Mbeki in South Africa, and also to tell me if looting and destabilizing a neighbor is what we need for 2062. That's my question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Raises many points. Eric does. Janus, hi.
Good morning, Rowena, and to the lady. Rwanda and many other African countries, they would like to go their way, which is a very often unconstitutional, and create that another 5 years for the president. And I don't know much about Rwanda, but she mentioned that she's a good president and he would like to continue with this good policy and improvement of the situation in Rwanda. But I think that man should resign, and from the same party they should find another one which is very also perhaps good as the president at the moment, and continuation of the political party who can improve
so continue the policies, yes.
All
right. And
that's right. But it doesn't have to be the same man, because usually what happens, these people, these presidents, they surround themselves with their cronies, and actually they, from the good, we can see the bad things happen. The similar situation in South Africa. I would like to see ANC, though I'm UDM member, I would like to see ANC to govern, still govern, but we need a change. We cannot allow for situation that's happening now, and Kalema Mutlanti would be, I think, the best replacement. But we should, I think, propose to that, because we need good government. ANC, their policy is good, but the people who are doing and surrounding themselves with many who actually are corrupted, they should be removed.
Well, all right, Janus, I was following you there for a while, but then later on you lost me. But many views coming through. I want us to start with what Anthony had to say, that it's also important that government not speak in forked tongues. But while on the one hand you're meeting business just before SONA, and I think he was making reference to the South African experience, and then a couple of days later you speak of white monopoly capital. So and that seems to create a distance between government and the private sector. Your comments on that?
Okay, the Rwanda government is run differently. I think I wish South African government can send their delegates to go and look at how the government is running its country. They run a country like a business. What do I mean? Every 6 months, they go for retreat to look at the scorecard on how they performed, and everybody comes back to answer to their regions why they could not achieve their performance. If our country can start holding people responsible for their their KPIs. Kagame has given his parliament KPIs. You have to achieve them. If you don't, which means you're not the right person. And also there is a very close interaction between the government and the private sector in Rwanda. That is what makes it different. You cannot speak to the private sector only before you go and to the sauna and all that. It must be a continuous process. Every second month, I get a member of parliament or a member of senate coming to the company, not calling me, coming on site. And it takes them 8 hours to drive to site to come and check how things are going. What are the challenges? What do I need help and all that?
But that having said that, it's also possible for the same policies to continue, but under a different leader.
It is possible.
Yes.
But on this one, remember at the end of the day, it's about the voice of the people. The government has to listen to the voice of the people. As soon as you lose that, then there's no control. Here we are talking about a country where you can leave your cell phone in a toilet or in the airport. They will be looking for you. That is how it is, because they have created themselves a certain type of a state and the way they want to live, and they live according to that. We should not say one thing and live according to other way. South Africa, we've got the best constitution in the world, but we are not seeing much of the benefit out of that.
And also Africa is a very young continent.
Very young.
In terms of the population. So how do we leverage that? How should we be engaging that?
On that one, it means we need to be looking at the value chain, down value chain, especially us as business. We cannot expect to employ everyone. We need to start being innovative on how we can start being exporters. I mean, I'm looking at simple things like, you look at the jacket I'm wearing.
It's a beautiful one, by the way.
Yes. So it's something that has been made by people around our factory. So now they've got their own shop, small shop. We don't go to town to buy. They've created their own cooperatives. And South Africa is good in that. Let me be honest with you. South Africa is good in cooperatives. But do we support them? That is what is important. Do you go to that cooperative and say to that woman, make sandals for me? Or do you go and buy the important ones? We need to change. Remember what I said at the beginning is about the mindset change.
All right, some SMSs. Rwanda clearly has politicians who have vision and inspire their citizens, says an SMS. Growth percentage is exactly that. Percentage is relative what the country already has. So paving 1 kilometer of a sand road in a small African country could be 50% development growth, says Colin. All right. Rwandans look to the future, not the past. That is why they will be successful, says Daniel in Port Elizabeth. So Agenda 2063 was first shared with the world, I think 3 years ago. It was in 2013, I think, when we first heard about it. Has it gained any traction?
I think it has, in a way. Not a lot, but there has been some movement. We see a lot of movement. I mean, like I'm giving you an example of my own on our own company, PPC, where now we have invested not only in Rwanda, but now we are busy building another operation in Ethiopia. We are also busy in DRC. We are also looking for other opportunities everywhere else. So it has, in a way, made the world realize that there are opportunities in Africa. Let's go there and invest and modernize this Africa and make it look better.
And like I said, we need to leverage our resources and what we have and make them work for us, but also at the same time guard against exploitation of the same resources by the West.
Yes.
So it's a fine balance that one needs to lead, because we live in a global village and we need to be cognizant of that too.
That is why I say partnering with the government. There should be no company that comes to South Africa and government has no say on that company.
All right. Ms. Busisiwe Legodi is Chief Executive Officer of CIMERWA Limited, talking to us about the politics of the continent.